Okay, I think we are recording. Yay. So hello, students. This is Professor Laura Castañeda, and I'm joined tonight by Abby Hamblin and Kristy Totten, who both work at the San Diego Union-Tribune in the opinion editorial team. And they are wonderful guests for us tonight because we are going to talk to them about podcasts, and we're going to talk to them about social media. And you know that in the modules for our class, we just finished talking about podcasts, and now we're moving into social media. So they are the absolute perfect guests for you to have. So I'm going to ask them both to introduce themselves and just kind of set up a little oral resume, like, you know, how you got to where you are and where you went to school and where you're from. So Abby, why don't you start?
Okay, hi, I'm Abby Hamblin. I don't know if anyone from San Diego State University is from Kansas, but that's where I'm from. I actually went to college here in San Diego at Point Loma Nazarene University. I got a journalism degree there, and my journalism career has taken me into a few different areas. I've done a job after college reviewing TV shows. I've had a job where I ran social media for a company. I was a city government reporter. I've also been a feature reporter and a blogger, and now I do podcasts and social media at the Union-Tribune, and I'm also a member of the editorial board. So very nice to meet everyone.
Kristy?
It's a big resume, Abby. My name is Kristy Totten. I've been with the paper for about a year now. I primarily work on podcasts, social media, and I'm also an editorial board member. Before this, let's see, I graduated from University of Missouri, Columbia, and I started my first job at the Las Vegas Review-Journal, which is Nevada's largest newspaper, working as a car editor, which was really fun. I got to drive a bunch of fast cars, do copy editing, web editing. From there, I became the news editor of Las Vegas City Life, where I was for a couple years. Then City Life unfortunately folded. Still for the same company, the Review-Journal, I became a technology and education reporter. After that, I was a staff writer at Las Vegas Weekly, a producer for Nevada Public Radio during a morning show that was all about Nevada news, and that brings me to my current position here at the UT.
Wow, just listening to both of you, it's obvious that you have to be willing to move around and leave home and maybe move to a city that you didn't want to. But in our case, we're pretty lucky to be living here in San Diego. But you both have done so much and such diverse journalism, which brings me to my next question. I know that you have both worked really, really hard as colleagues and partners on two podcasts, not one, but two podcasts, GenZ and Name Drop. So I'm hoping each of you can talk about one. You know, maybe Abby, you take one, and Kristy, you take one. Talk about what it's like. How did that come about? And what is it like to actually research, find the host, find the people you're going to interview, host, and produce an entire podcast?
Abby, I feel like you should represent HGZ for us, since you started before I did.
Yeah, so as you've probably been learning and finding out in your own research, there are lots of different types of podcasts. Kristy and I both do an interview podcast, which she'll talk about, and then our podcast, Hello Gen Z, was a narrative podcast. And so that's more of the scripting and doing a lot of reporting and deep research. And it definitely took, that was the first one I've done like that. And it definitely took way longer than I thought it would, but all the process was worth it. We basically started with an idea and an assignment from our editor at the paper saying, you know, get to know young people and their views on race and equity and diversity in any aspect of life, from politics to education to online and social media. And so we just started interviewing members of Gen Z without an idea in our head of where it would go. And we asked them a ton of questions. I met with groups of students, Kristy and I both. We met with groups of students, brought students in for one-on-one interviews. We did online surveys. There was a ton of reporting that went into it. We also brought in experts, because once we realized that, you know, a lot of what we had was just kind of conversation and interesting opinions and viewpoints, we also thought we needed some reporting to go with these interesting quotes and conversations we were having with members of Gen Z. So we talked to
And again,
demographers.
this was before the pandemic. When you say we brought them in, that was before the pandemic. Okay.
Yes. I have my mask like right here on my desk. Yeah, we reported the rest of this and actually recorded and edited it all from home in the last few months. But I think it's very worth sitting down and spending a lot of time. This is something that Kristy brought into this podcast when she came and joined to put it together, is to spend a lot of time up front thinking about your audience, how you want it to be, you know, sort of storyboard and outline where the project's going to go. Because it takes, again, we took scripts and we would have one run of a script and we would edit it 4 or 5 times. And we would, you know, put it into audio so we could listen to it and then edit it again. And so I think that's one type of podcast. Our other one is a little bit different than that. But we hosted it. That was another thing. You know, at a news outlet like the Union-Tribune, we have a lot less staff than, say, the New York Times does for something like this, or the LA Times, or Wondery, or some of those other places that make podcasts. And so Kristy and I did a lot of the work ourselves, which is a good thing that we have these skills and we're able to do it. And we wouldn't have been able to do it at our outlet if we didn't have those skills. But it is nice to be at, you know, the New York Times or This American Life and have all those people helping you.
And before Kristy starts talking about name drop, did either of you ever have voice training to be able to host the podcast, or did you just dive into it and practice?
No, I actually did I did a free class about podcast and audio writing, it was kind of my first foray into audio writing anyway. And one of the things they said is that it depends on what type of podcast you want to do, but that more and more, because of the type of experience audio is, it's not TV, it's not the newspaper, it's a personal experience. You're letting people into your ears, into your car, into your dishes, into your making your bed. And so having kind of like a natural, actual speaking voice, how you would speak, is kind of more what you want. At least that's what I learned in my research. And I think that's true, you know, the sort of TV reportery voice, which we love and respect, is maybe not what you need for something where you want to really connect with your audience.
That's a good point. And Kristy, tell us about Name Drop.
Sure. Well, first I wanted to say shout out to you for helping us edit HGZ and lending your expertise, because seriously, you really truly helped us so much, especially just with the small team we have, and we don't have as much broadcast experience as you do. So thank you very much. But Name Drop is an interview style podcast. It comes out every week. So Abby and I set out to interview interesting people that have shaped San Diego and have been shaped by it. So, you know, even maybe they're born and raised here, maybe they came here a few years ago for a specific project, but we really just wanted to dive into the personalities of this region, because people here are so amazing and talented and generous and interesting. And yeah, so I mean, every week we try to find an interesting guest. We talk to them for about an hour. And at the end, because it's called Name Drop, we ask them to give a shout out to somebody in the community they feel has helped them. So yeah, I think that's it in a nutshell.
And do you actually look for those folks to invite them as guests, or is it just actually them naming someone? You know, like, do you seek out those folks as guests for the podcast, or it's just a matter of them mentioning someone that they think is?
So far we haven't. You know, we considered that, and maybe it's something we'll do in the future, like if it was a chain reaction, you get to mention somebody. But I think what our fear was that it was going to be too insular and like stay within one kind of industry without getting out there. And we really tried to have variety, you know, so we have professors, we have doctors, we have fashion designers, we have chefs, we have, you know, people doing all different sorts of things. So at this point, it's really just sort of like a hat tip at the end to somebody who's impacted you in any way, shape, or form. But yeah, that's maybe an idea we should kick around some more.
I think it's great. I listened to both of them, not all the episodes. I walk every day, so I try to, you know, listen to different podcasts, and the few that I've listened to yours were very engaging. And I think you both complement each other, which I think is important when you're doing a podcast, because you're trying to make sure that listener stays with you, right? What has been some of the biggest challenges that you've had trying to put a podcast together?
Well, I'll say for HGZ, I mean, Abby has been working on this for, I think, about over a year. I've been working on this project for a year. In the beginning of the year, we had it all mapped out. And then, of course, the pandemic started. And then we re-entered another Black Lives Matter movement. And that just sort of like turned the project on its head. And we had to regroup and reconsider and do some new interviews and pivot and sort of push it out quickly, because we realized like, wow, this can become dated way faster than we even realized. These other subjects like politics, like ethnic studies, like demographics, like civic engagement, whatever it was that we were covering. So that, I think, was the toughest thing about Hello Gen Z. What would you say, Abby?
Yeah, I would say recording a podcast from home is pretty crazy. I wish I could show you guys the picture I took of me with a robe over my head, and Kristy has done the same thing. To get good sound, it cannot be stated enough how important good sound is. You can't just be having a fan blasting and your construction outside your house going wild. And so, we'll shut our windows and it's really hot and we're both sweating and frustrated. But the fact that we can do it from home just kind of shows you the power of podcasts too, because we're not some giant TV studio for ABC News or whatever it may be. It shows you that podcasting really is a medium for everybody, because we were able to do something that ideally we would have been in our podcast studio and at our nice desks and everything, but we pulled it off from home.
Well, you're still doing it, and I'm amazed, because that is a really hard situation to worry about all the technical, let alone the editorial part, which just the two of you. Sometimes on Fridays, different podcasts list all of the staff members that are on their staff working on a podcast, and I hear 10 or 12 names, and you two are pulling this off by yourself. So it's pretty amazing what you do for this. So I'll make sure that all of the students in this class get links to your podcast so that they can listen in and hopefully become subscribers. I really hope that they'll, listen in. So moving to social media, and I know this is a super loaded question because social media has so many facets to it, but both of you are responsible for the social media for our editorial opinions team, which is, again, a lot of work. So how do you begin to make sure you get the most important things out quickly? Because I'm certain that that's also a big part of it. And how did you both learn how to do all this social media?
I'll defer to Abby as our resident social media expert.
Yeah, so I think one thing that's really exciting when you talk to students is I'm 28, so I'm sort of like close to college, but also really far from it. And I think that one of my, the skill sets that I had coming into the industry was already being an early adopter of every social media. I love social media. My early first tweet was watching One Tree Hill, 2008. That's even actually like a boomer sort of show that none of you will know. But I think that I just learned by doing, but there is a difference between doing it for fun and saying, I have an Instagram account so I can run the New York Times Instagram account, and actually doing it professionally, which is, if I could give any advice, is to get that experience running an account for someone, because there is a difference in the voice you use, the writing that you do, the style, and how careful you have to be to not make errors, like all these things. There's a major difference between just being a person who tweets and being a person who runs a professional account. So I always say, if you're in a club, run your club's social media account. If you have a church, run your church's social media account, whatever you can do to get some experience doing it. Because I'll say it again, there's a big difference between just doing it for fun and doing it. But I think that, again, there is sort of like a race to be first on social media. And what helps on social media is building a audience and actually spending the time developing who you are as an account. Like Complex, you guys are probably all aware of, their tweets and Instagram posts are super like retweetable and likable because the personality they bring behind it. In a news organization, you can't necessarily have the same thing that you would if you were like a TikTok star. But I think you do have to put some strategy and development into who you are as an account. It's a little bit more fun than it used to be on social media. It used to be very strict and all of that, but now people it's emoji city, whether you're the New York Times or the tiniest paper. But again, there's a professional level to it too. So I think, as you mentioned, how do you decide what gets out first? I think it's more about who you are and who your audience is than what's going on in social media as a whole. And it's a lot to think about, but it's worth the time and energy to get it right.
Kristy, if you were a student again, what would you want to make sure, now that you know, what would you want to make sure that you study about social media? I mean, there are a few classes out there, but I bet you would both probably agree with me that you don't learn as much in the classroom as you need once you get into the industry. So what would you recommend, Kristy?
Well, when I was in school, I intentionally tried to diversify. You know, I always thought I wanted to be a magazine writer. And so I got, or an editor. And so I got an editing degree. But when I was there, I also learned layout because I wanted to do that. And I also got web, editing experience and posting things on CMS. And I also, I was using social media in my first time. So I would just say, regardless of what your major is, and regardless of what you think you want to do, the more skills you have, the better. As far as what I would seek out with social media, I mean, I don't know what classes are offered today, but I think just proficiency, right? And anytime you're trying to do something, you have to be, for lack of a better word, you have to be a user of it. You have to be a consumer of it to be a good creator of it. And so, for example, you're not going to be a good writer if you're not a reader. You can't make good podcasts if you don't listen to podcasts. And so I think that's almost true of anything. If you don't use a particular, social media platform, like I don't use TikTok, I'm probably not going to be good at TikTok. I actually wouldn't even attempt it because I would humiliate myself, but I have been on Facebook since the beginning. I have been on Twitter for a long time. I have been on Instagram for oh gosh, forever, and so I think just that familiarity and sort of knowing what the style and the feeling is of that particular platform, what's taboo, what's not. Like, I think, when you're on Twitter, you see when people just push Instagram links, it's like offensive. It's like, oh, or a Facebook link. It's like, you didn't take the time to craft it for this audience and we're not the same and I'm not going to click on that. So you kind of wasted your time. I guess, that would be my only advice. But as far as school goes, learn everything and anything you can and you feel like you might be interested in, because even if that doesn't end up being your career, I think it'll serve you.
Well, I just remembered that I ended the Zoom at 7:30, and so we're going to drop out pretty soon. So I think I'll end it there, even though I have about 10 more questions I wanted to ask you. But thank you both so much for giving up your time. I know how long your days are, and I thoroughly enjoy working with both of you and learned so much from you. So thank you very, very much for taking the time with these students.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Professor.